The moment Marcus's mother asked what I'd do if I discovered he was still married, I thought she was joking. I laughed. She didn't. We sat across from each other at her kitchen table, the one with a scarred edge that Marcus always promised to repair. She'd invited me over for coffee, just the two of us. Girl time, she'd called it. Her warm smile making me believe I was finally being accepted into the family fold. Now, watching her hand tremble as she set down her ceramic mug, I felt the first whisper of unease. "There's something you need to see," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Before I could respond, she pulled out her phone and opened a photo album. The first image stopped time itself. Marcus stood in a charcoal tuxedo beside a woman draped in an intricate white gown. The date stamp glowed accusingly. 5 years ago. 3 years before we'd even met. "That's Elena," his mother said quietly, "my daughter-in-law." The room tilted sideways. "No," I managed, my voice strange in my own ears. "We discussed this. I asked him point blank when things got serious between us." She scrolled to another photo. Marcus and Elena at Christmas 2 years ago. Another from last spring, just months before he'd asked me to move into his apartment. In every image, they looked genuinely happy. His arm wrapped around his waist in that same protective gesture I knew so intimately. "They never divorced," she continued, her voice fracturing. "He simply stopped coming home. Stopped answering her calls. She's been searching for him for 18 months. My hands went numb. All those weekends he claimed he had to work late. The phone calls he'd taken the other room, his voice dropping to a murmur. How he'd insisted we keep our relationship off social media because he valued privacy. How he'd been adamant about maintaining separate bank accounts for independence. "Where is she now?" I whispered. "She still lives in their house, the one he told you burned down in that fire." She scrolled again, revealing a photograph of a stunning Victorian with a cobalt blue door, posted just yesterday on Elena's Instagram account. I thought of the apartment Marcus and I shared, the lease bearing both our names, the engagement ring he'd given me last month, tearfully telling me I was his entire universe, that he'd never loved anyone the way he loved me. "Does she know about me?" I asked. His mother's silence was answer enough. Then she spoke words that turned my blood to ice. "There's more. You're not the first. After Elena, there was Sophie, then Rachel, then you." I stared at her, my mind refusing to process the information. "You're saying he's done this before?" She nodded, tears carving paths down her cheeks. "I tried to warn them, too. Sophie didn't believe me until she discovered Elena's wedding dress in a storage unit. Rachel figured it out when Elena showed up at their apartment unannounced." She paused, her eyes meeting mine with devastating clarity. "I thought perhaps this time would be different. But then I saw that ring on your finger. How many women had sat in this exact chair, drinking coffee from similar mugs, having their reality dismantled piece by piece?" My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Running late, sweetheart. Don't wait up. Love you." His mother reached across the table, her grip firm on my hand. "Elena wants to meet you. She's downstairs in my car right now. She's been waiting to talk to you for weeks, ever since she saw you two at the grocery store." Suddenly, everything clicked into focus. The way Marcus always avoided that particular grocery chain, his insistence on leaving immediately whenever we ventured near the south side of town, the flash of panic in his eyes when I'd suggested visiting his mother more frequently. "I should go down there," I said, my legs unsteady as I stood. His mother grabbed my wrist, her fingers surprisingly strong. "Wait, there's something else you need to know first. Something Elena discovered that finally made her stop searching for him." She pulled a manila folder from her purse. Inside lay legal documents, police reports, and printouts of news articles. My vision blurred as I attempted to make sense of the pages before me. "Marcus isn't even his real name," she said softly. The documents swam before my eyes. A birth certificate bearing a different name, Dominic Hayes Sullivan, arrest warrants from 2 different states, fraud charges, identity theft, a missing persons report filed by someone named Victoria Sullivan in 2019. "Who's Victoria?" I managed to ask. "His first wife," she whispered, before Elena, before any of us understood what he was truly capable of. The room felt like it was compressing around me, squeezing the air out of my lungs. "How long have you known?" I asked. 6 months. Elena hired a private investigator after he disappeared. That's when everything unraveled. She discovered Sophie and Rachel, found out about the other names he'd used, found out about Victoria. "Where is Victoria now?" I asked. But part of me dreaded the answer. She looked away. "That's what Elena needs to talk to you about. That's why she's been trying to reach you. That's why I finally had to tell you myself." The morning air hit my face as I descended the stairs, his mother's hand steady on my back as though she feared I might collapse. I might have. A silver sedan sat in the driveway. Through the window, I could see a woman with dark hair pulled into a low ponytail. She looked exhausted, hollowed out, as though something essential had been carved from her core. Elena stepped out of the car. We stood there for a frozen moment. Two women who'd loved the same man, been betrayed by the same man, been destroyed by the same man. "I'm sorry, this isn't how you imagined finding out," she said. My voice emerged flat, emotionless. "How long were you married before he left?" 4 years. We met at college. He was charismatic, attentive, everything I dreamed of finding. We bought the house together, talked about starting a family. Then one day, he simply didn't come home from work. No note, no explanation, just gone. The engagement ring on my finger felt like it was searing through my skin. Did he propose the same way? The sunset proposal on the beach? She let out a bitter laugh. No, he proposed at an upscale restaurant, made this elaborate speech about how he was his soulmate, how he'd been waiting his entire life for me. I'm guessing he varied his approach for you. I nodded, unable to speak. Sophie got the beach proposal. Rachel got it at a concert. He's nothing if not creative. How did you find me? I finally asked. I've been tracking his patterns, watching his mother's house because I knew he would eventually have to visit. That's when I saw you two together about 8 weeks ago. You were laughing at something he said, holding his hand. You looked so happy, just like I used to look. Nausea washed over me. All those months of falling in love, building a life together, planning our future, all of it constructed on lies. His mother spoke up. "We need to go inside. What Elena has to tell you, you'll want to be sitting down for." Back in the kitchen, Elena spread documents across the table like evidence at a crime scene, which I was beginning to realize they essentially were. Dominic, the man you know as Marcus, has been doing this for at least 8 years that we can verify, possibly longer. He meets women, builds relationships with them, proposes, then drains their bank accounts before vanishing. But we have a joint account. He hasn't taken anything yet, she emphasized. With me, he waited until after the wedding. He convinced me to consolidate both our savings into one account for our future. 3 months after we married, he transferred everything out and disappeared. $89,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. I had approximately $65,000 in savings, money we were supposedly using for the wedding and a down payment on a house he'd been enthusiastically planning just last week.
Sophie lost $112,000, Elena continued. Rachel lost $78,000. And Victoria, her voice dropped. Victoria lost everything. Her life savings, her house, her car. She had to declare bankruptcy. What happened to her? I asked, though I wasn't certain I wanted to know. That's the complicated part. Victoria filed a police report, but there wasn't sufficient evidence to press charges. He'd covered his tracks masterfully, made it appear as though she'd willingly given him access. The stress of it all triggered a breakdown. She's been in and out of psychiatric facilities for the past 4 years. My stomach churned violently. This man I'd built my life around, who I'd trusted with everything, was a predator, a professional con artist who'd systematically destroyed multiple women's lives. The thing is, his mother said quietly, I didn't know. Not initially. He's my son, and I wanted to believe he was simply unlucky in love, that these relationships just weren't working out. But when Elena came to me 6 months ago with irrefutable proof, I couldn't deny it anymore. I looked at her, searching for answers in her tear-stained face. Why didn't you warn me sooner?
I tried, she said, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I called you twice, left messages saying we needed to talk urgently, but he got to you first, didn't he? Told you I was being dramatic or interfering. He had. He'd explained that his mother was going through a difficult time, that she sometimes said strange things, that I should humor her, but not take anything too seriously. I'd believed him completely, trusted his explanation without question. There's more, Elena said, pulling out another document. This one was a medical report. Victoria's psychiatric evaluation from last year. According to her doctor, Victoria claims Dominic's next target is planned, that he's escalating. Escalating how? The words barely made it past my lips. She met my eyes with devastating directness. Victoria says he's not just stealing money anymore. She thinks he's building towards something worse. The implication hung in the air, heavy and horrifying. I wanted to dismiss it as paranoid delusions from a traumatized woman, but everything else Victoria had reportedly said about
about him had been proven true. What exactly did she say? I asked. Elena hesitated, weighing her words carefully. She told her doctors that Dominic has a pattern. He selects women with substantial savings, limited close family ties, and stable employment. He isolates them gradually, makes them emotionally dependent, and once he has complete access to their finances, he makes them disappear. That's insane, I said, though my voice wavered with uncertainty. Is it? Elena challenged. Think about your relationship carefully. Has he encouraged you to drift away from your friends, suggested you don't need to maintain close ties with your family since you have him now? The truth crashed over me like a frigid wave. My best friend Olivia and I used to talk daily. Now it had been weeks since our last meaningful conversation. Marcus always had some reason why we couldn't make plans with her. Too busy, too tired. She's too negative. She doesn't understand what we have. My parents lived 3 hours away. Marcus had gently suggested I visit only every few months instead of monthly like I'd always done. They're smothering you. You're an adult now. You need space to grow. I'd rationalized every suggestion, interpreted it as him wanting more exclusive time together. Now I saw it for what it truly was: systematic isolation. Victoria told police that Dominic was planning his biggest scheme yet, something that would set him up permanently. She didn't have specific details, just fragments of conversations she'd overheard before he abandoned her. She tried to warn authorities, but without concrete evidence, they couldn't act. My hands trembled so violently I had to clasp them together. What do you think he's planning? I think, Elena said, slowly, deliberately, he's found someone with more than just savings, someone with substantial assets he can't simply transfer out of an account, someone who'd need willingly to sign everything over to him. My inheritance. The words escaped before I could stop them. Both women leaned forward urgently. What inheritance? His mother asked. My grandfather died last year. He left me his estate. It's held in a trust that I gain full access to when I turn 30 or when I get married, whichever comes first. The value is approximately $2.3 million. The silence was deafening. When do you turn 30? Elena asked finally. Not for 6 years, but we're getting married in 3 months. There it is, she said grimly. That's his endgame. He's not after your savings. He's after the entire trust. But I'd have to willingly transfer it to him, I protested. The trust is ironclad. Even married, he couldn't just take it unless you signed it over to him, his mother said, or granted him power of attorney, or added him as primary beneficiary. He'd been suggesting exactly that. Just last week, he'd brought up estate planning, explaining how married couples should have each other as beneficiaries on everything, how we should establish power of attorney in case anything ever happened. He'd made it sound romantic, practical, normal. I'd nearly agreed. We need to go to the police, I said, standing abruptly. With what evidence? Elena asked. We have proof he's used multiple identities and maintained overlapping relationships, but we can't prove he's planning to commit a crime. Victoria already attempted that route. They can't arrest someone for planning to steal money that hasn't been stolen yet. Then what do we do? His mother looked between us, her expression resolute despite the tears. We set a trap. Over the next hour, we constructed a plan. It made me sick to contemplate, but I couldn't identify another viable option. If what Victoria claimed was true, if he really was escalating, other women remained at risk. I was at risk. Elena would continue monitoring his movements through contacts she'd developed over months of investigation. His mother would strategically feed him information that painted me as the perfect trusting target, and I would return home and pretend nothing had changed. The hardest part would be acting normal, looking at him across the dinner table, knowing what he'd done, letting him hold me at night, knowing he'd held Sophie and Rachel and Elena in precisely the same way. Hearing him say he loved me, knowing those words held absolutely no meaning. Can you do this? His mother asked gently. It's going to be incredibly difficult. If he senses anything is off, even slightly, he'll disappear. We'll lose our chance to stop him. I thought about Victoria in a psychiatric facility, about Elena losing her savings and 4 years of her life, about Sophie and Rachel, whose complete stories I hadn't even heard yet, about the women who might come after me if we didn't stop him now. I can do this, I said. Elena handed me a small device that resembled an ordinary USB drive. Plant this somewhere in your apartment where he won't notice, near where you usually discuss finances. It'll capture everything. What about my phone? Can he track that? He probably is, his mother said, which is why you need to be extraordinarily careful. Only contact us from burner phones or computers he doesn't have access to. Assume he's monitoring everything. The paranoia that statement induced was overwhelming. How long had he been watching me, reading my messages, tracking my location? There's a
support group, Elena said quietly. Other women who've been through this with different men. Some of us meet Thursdays at the community center on Riverside Avenue. You don't have to come, but if you need people who understand, we're there. I took the information, tucking it into my purse next to the folder of evidence. Then I hugged both of them, these women who'd been through hell and were still fighting. These strangers who cared more about my well-being than the man I planned to marry. The drive home felt surreal. Everything appeared identical. Same streets, same buildings, same coffee shop where Marcus and I went every Sunday morning. But nothing was the same. I was driving back to an apartment I shared with a stranger, a dangerous stranger. His car wasn't in the parking lot when I arrived. I let myself in, examining our space with new eyes. The framed photos on the walls of us smiling, arms entwined. The dishes in the sink from breakfast. The ridiculous stuffed bear he'd won for me at the county fair sitting on our couch. Our entire life together was a meticulously constructed lie. I found the USB recording device in my purse and searched for an optimal hiding spot. The bookshelf, I decided. We had a small decorative box on the middle shelf containing loose change and random trinkets. I buried the device beneath old receipts and foreign coins, making it appear completely natural. Then I sat on the couch and waited for the man I loved to walk through the door, waited for the monster wearing his face. He arrived around 8 with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. "I'm sorry I've been so busy lately," he said, kissing my forehead with practiced tenderness. "But I got us dinner and I'm all yours for the rest of the night." I smiled like my heart was shattering. "Thank you. That's really thoughtful." We ate on the couch, watching a show we'd been binge-watching together. He laughed at all the appropriate moments, made jokes about the characters, held my hand during commercial breaks. He was so utterly convincing. If I didn't know better, I'd believe every second of this performance. "How was your day?" he asked during a lull. "Pretty quiet. Grocery store, laundry. Your mom called earlier." I felt him tense beside me, almost inconspicuously. "Oh yeah? What did she want?" "Just checking in, wondering if we'd set a final date for the wedding yet." He relaxed. "She's excited about it. I think she's secretly worried we're going to elope and skip the whole ceremony." I laughed as though that was the most absurd thing imaginable. "No way. I want the full experience. The dress, the venue, the dancing, everything." "Good," he said, pulling me closer, "because you deserve everything." The words should have melted me. Instead, they made my skin crawl.
"We should probably finalize some of those wedding details soon," I ventured. "The deposit for the venue is due next month." "You're right. And we should probably talk about combining our finances fully before the wedding. Makes everything easier." There it was, the opening move. "What do you mean?" I asked innocently. "Well, we're getting married. Seems silly to keep everything separate. We should have a joint account for all our money, make each other beneficiaries on everything. It's what married couples do." I pretended to consider this. "That makes sense, though my trust fund is kind of complicated. Lots of legal paperwork." "I'm happy to help you with that," he said smoothly. "We can go through it together, make sure everything is set up properly for our future." Our future. The future he was planning to steal from me. "Let me think about it," I said. "I want to make sure I understand all the legal implications." "Of course, no rush. We have time." But I could see the calculation in his eyes. He was already planning his next move, figuring out how to push without seeming pushy, how to manipulate me into signing away everything. I excused myself to take a shower, needing space from his presence. Under the hot water, I let myself cry silently, mourning the relationship I thought I had, grieving the version of Marcus that never actually existed. When I emerged, he was on his phone texting someone. He quickly locked the screen when he saw me. "Who was that?" I asked casually. "Just work stuff. Crisis with a client that can't wait until tomorrow." The lie came so easily to him, as natural as breathing. That night, lying in bed beside him, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how many other women had done exactly this. Lain next to Dominic Hayes Sullivan, believing his lies, trusting his touch, planning a future that would never materialize. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Elena, are you safe?" I waited until Marcus's breathing deepened into sleep, then typed back, "Yes, he's already pushing to combine finances." "That's faster than expected. Be careful, we're watching." I deleted the messages and set my phone aside. Tomorrow, I'd buy a burner phone. Tomorrow, I'd start documenting everything. Tomorrow, I'd begin building the case that would finally stop him. But tonight, I let myself grieve. Grieve for the love I'd lost, even though it had never been real. Grieve for the life I'd imagined, even though it had been built on sand. Grieve for the woman I'd been this morning, walking into his mother's kitchen. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone wearier, someone who understood that survival sometimes required becoming someone you never imagined you could be. Someone who would make absolutely certain that Dominic Hayes Sullivan never destroyed another life. The next morning, I woke before Marcus. I made coffee, scrolled through my phone with false casualness, and acted like my world hadn't imploded 24 hours ago. When he
he woke, I kissed him good morning and pretended everything was fine. I have to run some errands today, I told him over breakfast. Need anything? Nah, I'm good. I have back-to-back meetings until late afternoon. Perfect. That gave me time to meet Elena without arousing suspicion. We'd arranged to meet at a cafe 3 towns over, somewhere Marcus would never randomly appear. Elena was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with another woman. This is Sophie, Elena said as I slid into the seat. Sophie was petite, with auburn hair and delicate features. She looked younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-20s. She gave me a sad, knowing smile. Welcome to the club nobody wants to join, she said. How long were you with him? I asked. 14 months. We met at a professional networking event. He said he was in consulting, traveled frequently for work. That explained why he'd disappear for days at a time. Turns out he was with Elena during those trips. How did you find out the truth? I asked. His mother called me, just like she called you, but I didn't believe her initially. Thought she was being manipulative, trying to sabotage our relationship. Then Elena showed up at my apartment with their marriage certificate. That was an unforgettable day. How much did you lose? I asked quietly. $112,000. My entire inheritance from my grandmother. He convinced me to invest it in his business, said we'd double our money within a year. Instead, he cleaned out the account and disappeared. Did you go to the police? I tried, but he'd structured everything to look legitimate. Made me sign paperwork that basically said I was willingly investing in his company. Legally, there was nothing they could do. I looked at Elena. And you? What happened after he left? I spent 6 months thinking he'd come back, she admitted. Made excuses for him. Thought maybe he'd had an accident or was suffering from amnesia. Anything but the truth. Then my credit cards started getting declined. That's when I discovered he'd maxed them all out before leaving. $35,000 in credit card debt on top of the savings he'd taken. I felt physically ill. How do we stop him? There has to be something we can do. Sophie leaned forward, her eyes intense. There is, but it's risky, and it requires you to keep playing along until we have enough evidence to make criminal charges stick. What kind of evidence? We need him on record discussing the fraud, admitting to his past crimes, explaining his methods. Basically, we need him to incriminate himself. That's what the recording device is for, Elena added. But we need more than just him discussing finances with you. We need him to slip up, to reference his past cons, to say something that proves intent. How do I get him to do that? Sophie pulled out a laptop. We've been researching his patterns. He gets comfortable about 6 months into a relationship, starts dropping hints about his expertise in finance and investment, brags about past successes. If you can get him talking about his accomplishments, he might reveal more than he intends. The waitress came by and we ordered coffee, falling silent until she left. When she was gone, Elena showed me a folder even thicker than the one I'd seen yesterday. This is everything we've compiled. Bank statements showing patterns of large transfers followed by account closures, testimony from Victoria's psychiatric evaluations, records of the different names and social security numbers he's used, job applications with falsified information. We've been building this case for months. Have you shown this to the police? We've tried, but without proof of current illegal activity, they say it's a civil matter. The fraud charges in those other states never went anywhere because he's so good at covering his tracks. We need something concrete, something undeniable. So I am your concrete evidence, I said. They both nodded. I'm sorry, Sophie said. I know this is terrifying, but if we don't stop him now, he'll just keep doing this. And Victoria thinks he's building for something worse. What could be worse than ruining someone's financial life? Elena and Sophie exchanged glances. Patricia claims she overheard him on the phone before he left, talking about insurance policies. Large life insurance policies on his partners. The implication hit me like ice water. You think he's planning to kill someone? We don't know, Elena said quickly. Victoria's mental state isn't great. She could be paranoid or misremembering, but we can't ignore the possibility. Has anyone checked on Rachel? I asked suddenly. You said there were 4 of us, Elena, Sophie, Rachel, and me. Where is Rachel? Sophie's face went pale. We haven't been able to find Rachel. She's been missing for 8 months. The cafe felt too small, too hot, the walls closing in. Missing? She dropped off the grid right after Dominic left, stopped showing up to work, stopped answering calls. Her apartment was cleared out. At first, we thought she'd just moved away to start over, but no one has heard from her. Not her employer, not her family, no one. Did you file a missing persons report? Her family did, but she's an adult who left voluntarily. There's no evidence of foul play. The police say she has the right to disappear if she wants to. But you don't think that's what happened, I said, my voice hollow. I don't know what to think, Elena admitted. Maybe she really did just want to start over somewhere new. Or maybe Victoria's fears aren't as paranoid paranoid as we hoped. We need to find Rachel, I said firmly. Before we can prove anything about Dominic, we need to know she's safe. We've been trying, Sophie said. We hired the same private investigator Elena used, but Rachel's trail goes completely cold. No credit card usage, no social media activity, no paper trail of any kind. But people don't just disappear, I said, not without help. The three of us sat in heavy silence, each contemplating the horrible possibilities. Finally, Elena spoke. There's someone else we should talk to, someone who knew Dominic before any of us. Who?
His ex-wife from high school. They married young, divorced within a year. She still lives in the same town where he grew up. I found her last month, but haven't approached her yet. Why not? Because she has a restraining order against him. Whatever happened between them, it was bad enough that legal intervention was required. We need to talk to her, I said. She might know something that could help us find Rachel, or prove what he's really planning. Elena pulled out her phone. Her name is Natalie Chen. She lives about 4 hours from here. I have her address and phone number. Call her, I said. Set up a meeting. I'll tell Marcus I'm visiting a college friend for the weekend. Sophie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're braver than I was. When I found out, I just ran. Moved to a different state and tried to forget the whole thing. I should have fought back. You're fighting now, I told her. That's what matters. We spent another hour going over details. Elena showed me how to use the recording device, how to back up the files to a secure cloud server. Sophie taught me which questions to ask to get Dominic talking without seeming suspicious. By the time I left the cafe, I had a plan. It was risky and complicated, but it was the first time since yesterday morning that I felt like I had any control over the situation. I stopped at an electronics store and bought a burner phone with cash. Then I drove to the community center on Riverside Avenue, the one Elena had mentioned. The support group wasn't meeting until Thursday, but I wanted to see the place, make it real in my mind. There was a flyer in the window. Financial Abuse Support Group, Thursdays at 7 p.m. All genders welcome, confidential. How many people were in there every Thursday, I wondered? How many lives had been destroyed by people like Dominic? How many victims were still trapped in their own versions of my nightmare? I took a photo of the flyer and saved it to my new phone. When I got home, Marcus was already there, earlier than he'd said he'd be. My heart jumped into my throat. Hey, you're home early, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Meetings got canceled, he said, smiling. Thought I'd surprise you. Where were you? Just running errands, like I said. Picked up some things for the apartment. I showed him the shopping bags I'd strategically picked up at a home goods store on the way back, hoping the evidence would satisfy his curiosity. He smiled and pulled me into a hug. I missed you today. The words that used to make me melt now made me want to push him away. But I hugged him back, playing my part perfectly. I've been thinking about what you said, I told him, about combining our finances. His eyes lit up with interest that he tried to mask as casual curiosity. Yeah? It makes sense. We're getting married. We should start acting like a married couple now. I'm glad you see it that way. We can start the paperwork this weekend if you want. Actually, I was thinking we should wait until after the wedding. My grandfather's trust has specific clauses about marriage, and I want to make sure we do everything by the book. I could see him recalculating, trying to figure out how to push without revealing his urgency. Sure, that makes sense, though we could at least combine our regular savings accounts now, start building our joint future. Let me talk to my bank first, I said. Make sure I understand the process. Of course, take your time. But I could see the impatience flickering behind his eyes, barely concealed beneath that charming smile. That evening, I suggested we watch a documentary about financial planning. I'd chosen it carefully from Sophie's list of suggestions, topics that might get Dominic talking about money and investments. He was initially reluctant, but agreed when I said I wanted to understand finances better for our future. As we watched, I asked seemingly innocent questions, like, have you ever invested in anything that really paid off? A few things, he said vaguely. Real estate mostly. Bought low, sold high. It's all about timing. Did you learn that in school? He laughed. No, I learned it the hard way. Lost some money early on, making stupid decisions. But you learn from your mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Just trusting the wrong people. Going in on deals without proper protection. Now I know better. The recording device was capturing every word. Over the next few days, I slowly drew him out, asked about his past, his previous relationships, his business ventures. He was careful, I'll give him that. Never said anything directly incriminating, but he dropped hints, small admissions that would mean nothing on their own, but would build into a pattern. Meanwhile, Elena was setting up a meeting with Natalie. She'd finally reached her, and Natalie had agreed to talk to us. I need to visit my friend Julia this weekend, I told Marcus on Wednesday night. She's going through a rough breakup and needs support. This weekend? We were supposed to look at
at wedding venues Saturday. I know, I'm sorry, but she really needs me right now. We can reschedule the venues next week. He looked annoyed but nodded. Sure, friends are important. Thank you for understanding. Will you be okay on your own? I'll manage. Will you be gone overnight? Probably. She lives a few hours away, so it makes sense to stay over. Text me when you get there safely. And I could hear the subtext, so I know where you are. I will. Friday morning, I packed a small bag and drove to meet Elena and Sophie at a designated spot halfway to Natalie's town. We'd caravan the rest of the way together. During the drive, Elena called me on the burner phone. How are you holding up? I said. I'm okay, nervous about this meeting. Natalie sounded scared when I talked to her. Whatever happened between them, she's still terrified of him. Did she say what he did? Not in detail. Just that he was dangerous and we needed to be careful. She made me promise we weren't bringing him with us. What do you think happened to her? She wouldn't say over the phone. Said she needed to see us in person. Needed to know we were really trying to stop him. We arrived in Natalie's town around 2 in the afternoon. It was a small place, the kind where everyone knew everyone else's business. Natalie lived in a modest house at the end of a quiet street. She was waiting for us on the porch, a small woman with dark hair streaked with premature gray and wary eyes that seemed to see everything. She looked to be in her early 30s, but there was something aged about her, like she'd seen too much too soon. You must be Elena, she said. And Sophie. Her eyes landed on me. And you're the current girlfriend. Not for longer, I said. Come inside. I don't like being out in the open. Her house was neat but sparse. Minimal furniture, no personal photos on display. It looked like she was ready to pack up and leave at a moment's notice. Can I offer you anything? Water? Coffee? Asked Natalie, her voice tight with nervous energy. We're fine, Elena said gently. Thank you for agreeing to see us. Natalie sat across from us, hands clasped tightly in her lap. I need you to understand something first. What happened between Dominic and me, I've never told anyone the full story. Not the police, not my family, not my therapist. Because every time I tried, he'd somehow find out, and he'd make my life hell. He's not going to know about this meeting, I assured her. You can't guarantee that, she said, her voice trembling. He has ways of finding things out, ways of watching people without them knowing. The fear in her voice was palpable, infectious. How long were you married? Sophie asked. 11 months. We got married right out of high school. I was 17, he was 18. My parents were against it, but I was so in love. He was everything to me. What happened? At first, it was perfect. He was attentive, loving, everything I'd wanted. Then about 3 months in, things started changing. Small things at first. He'd get angry if I spent time with my friends. He'd accuse me of flirting with other men. He'd check my phone constantly. That sounds like classic controlling behavior, Elena said. It was more than that, Natalie continued, her voice dropping. He started isolating me from everyone, made me quit my job because he said the male manager was inappropriate with me, convinced me to drop out of community college because he said education was making me think I was better than him. Within 6 months, I had no friends, no job, no prospects. I was completely dependent on him. How did you get out? I asked. Natalie's hands started shaking. That's the part I've never told anyone, because it sounds insane, because I still don't fully understand what happened. We're listening, Sophie said softly. One night, I woke up to find him standing over me with a pillow. He was just standing there, holding it, staring down at me. When he realized I was awake, he put it down and left the room. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. Oh my God, Elena breathed. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, that it was a nightmare, but I knew it wasn't. I'd been awake. I'd seen him clearly. Did you confront him? No, I was too terrified. Instead, I started sleeping with my door locked, started hiding money, started planning my escape. She paused, her eyes distant. But then something worse happened. I found a life insurance policy he'd taken out on me. $500,000. He'd forged my signature on the paperwork. That's what Victoria mentioned. Life insurance policies. I nodded. When I confronted him about it, he said it was standard for married couples. Protection for both of us. But I knew better. I knew what he'd been planning that night with a pillow. You think he was going to kill you? Elena said quietly. I know he was. The policy had only been active for a month. Most policies have a waiting period before they pay out for certain types of death. He was waiting for that period to end. How did you get away? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I told my parents everything. They immediately moved me out while he was at work. broke. We filed for divorce, and I got a restraining order. My dad wanted to go to the police, but I was too scared. Dominic had made it clear that if I ever told anyone what really happened, he'd come back for me. But you're telling us now, Sophie said. Because I've been following the news. Rachel's disappearance. I saw her missing persons report online, and I recognized the man in the photos with her. It was Dominic, even though he was using a different name. You think he killed Rachel? Sophie said, her voice hollow. I think Rachel had life insurance, and I think Dominic is done with just stealing money. The room fell silent, the weight of her words pressing down on us. We need to find out if Rachel had a life insurance policy, I said finally, and if she did, who the beneficiary was. How do we do that? Sophie asked. Rachel's family might know. They filed the missing persons report. They might be able to access her financial records. What if Dominic is the beneficiary? What if he's already collected on the policy? Then we have him, Natalie said, because you can't collect on a life insurance policy without a death certificate, and you can't get a death certificate without a body or significant evidence of death. Unless he created that evidence, I said, the horror of it settling over me like a shroud. We need to go to the police, Sophie said. This is beyond gathering evidence for fraud. This is potential murder. They won't believe us, Elena said. Not without proof. A high school ex-wife story about a pillow 15 years ago isn't enough. What about Rachel's family? I asked. Would they help us? It's worth trying, Natalie said, but be careful. If Dominic finds out you're digging into Rachel's disappearance, he'll know something's wrong. I pulled out my phone. I'm supposed to text him when I get to my friend's house. If I don't, he'll get suspicious. Send the text. Keep everything as normal as possible, Elena said. I sent a quick message. Made it safely. Julia's in rough shape, but we're going to have a good girls' night. Love you. His response came within seconds. Love you too. Have fun. Can't wait to have you home tomorrow. Those words used to fill me with warmth. Now they felt like a threat. We need a plan. A real one. We can't just keep gathering evidence and hoping the police will eventually listen. Natalie stood up and went to a closet. She pulled out a box and brought it back to the table. Inside were dozens of documents, photos, and handwritten notes. I've been tracking him, she admitted. For 15 years, I've been following his life from a distance. Every time he moves, every time he changes his name, every time he starts a relationship. I've documented it all. Why? Elena asked. Because I knew eventually he'd do something that would prove I wasn't crazy, that would prove what he really is. And I wanted to be ready with evidence when that day came. She spread the contents of the box across the table. There were photos of Dominic with different women, documents showing his various identities, newspaper clippings about Rachel's disappearance, and printouts of social media posts from his victims. This is incredible, I said, looking through the materials. It's obsessive, Natalie corrected. But when someone tries to kill you and no one believes you, obsession becomes survival. Have you identified all his victims? No, these are just the ones I've been able to confirm. I'm sure there are more, probably many more, dating back to right after our marriage ended. Elena was examining a timeline Natalie had created. According to this, he never goes more than a few months with a new target. He overlaps relationships, sometimes juggling 3 or 4 women at once. How is that possible? I asked. How does he keep track of all the lies? He's incredibly intelligent, Natalie said, and he doesn't see people as individuals. We're all just marks to him, resources to be exploited. The documentation was damning. If we could just get the police to look at it seriously. What we need, Elena said slowly, is to connect him definitively to Rachel's disappearance. If we can do that, they'll have to investigate. And once they start digging, they'll find everything else. How do we do that? I asked. Natalie pulled out another document. Rachel's last known location was her apartment. She told her family she was going on a weekend trip with her boyfriend, the man we know as Dominic. She never came back. Her car was found abandoned at a trailhead about 100 miles north of here. Was there any evidence of foul play? No, the car was clean. No signs of struggle. Authorities treated it as a possible suicide or voluntary disappearance. But you don't think that's what happened, Sophie said. I think he took her somewhere remote, killed her, and staged the car to look like she walked into the woods on her own, maybe made it look like suicide. But without a body, there's no case. So we need to find the body, I said, the words feeling surreal as they left my mouth. Or we need Dominic to confess what he did, Elena added. How do we get him to do that? I asked. Natalie met my eyes with an intensity that made me shiver. You make him think you're the next victim. You become so perfect, so compliant, so trusting that he can't resist bragging about how good he is at this. Narcissists always need to be recognized for their intelligence, their skills. If you play it right, he'll want you to know how clever he's been. That sounds incredibly dangerous, Sophie said. It is, Natalie agreed, but it's the only way I can see to get a confession on record. I thought about the recording device in my apartment. apartment, capturing days of careful conversations about the trust fund Dominic was so eager to access, about the wedding that was supposed to happen in 3 months. I'll do it, I said, but I need help planning exactly what to say, and I need backup in case something goes wrong.
We'll be your backup, Elena promised, every step of the way. We spent the next several hours going through Natalie's research and building our strategy. She shared everything she knew about Dominic's patterns, his triggers, his weaknesses. By the time we left, I had a detailed plan and a timeline. The drive back was quiet. We were each lost in our own thoughts, processing everything we'd learned. The magnitude of what we were attempting was overwhelming. Elena broke the silence. Are you sure you want to do this? We can find another way. There is no other way, I said. We've all been trying other ways for years. It's time to end this. When I got back to our apartment Sunday evening, Marcus was waiting with dinner from my favorite Italian restaurant. How's Julia? He asked, pulling me into a hug. Better. We talked through a lot. I think she's going to be okay. That's good. I missed you. He pulled me into a hug, and I forced myself not to tense up. Every touch from him now felt like contamination, like his lies were seeping into my skin. Over dinner, I brought up the trust fund again. I've been thinking more about the estate planning you mentioned, I said. Maybe we should talk to a lawyer together, make sure everything is set up properly. His eyes lit up with barely concealed excitement. That's a great idea. I actually know a good estate attorney. Used to work with him at my previous job. Of course he did. Of course he had an attorney already lined up. Probably someone who'd help him structure everything in his favor. Let me know when you want to schedule something. No rush, though. We have time before the wedding. Sure, but sooner is better. These things can take a while to process. I nodded like I agreed, like I wasn't seeing straight through his eagerness. That week, I continued my double life. During the day, I worked my normal job, came home, cooked dinner, pretended everything was fine. At night, after Marcus fell asleep, I'd sneak into the bathroom with my burner phone and update Elena and Sophie on everything he'd said. Thursday evening, I told Marcus I was going to a yoga class. Instead, I went to the support group at the community center. There were about a dozen people there, mostly women, but a few men as well. They sat in a circle, sharing their stories of financial abuse. Listening to them, I realized how common this was, how many predators existed, how many lives they destroyed. When it was my turn to introduce myself, I said, I'm here because the man I thought I loved has been systematically planning to steal everything from me, and I just found out he might have killed his previous girlfriend. The room went silent. After the meeting, several people came up to me. They shared resources, offered advice, gave their contact information in case I needed support. Their kindness was overwhelming. One woman, probably in her 60s, took my hands in hers. Whatever you're planning, be smarter than him and be safe. Men like that don't like losing. I promised her I would be careful. By the end of the second week, I had dozens of hours of recorded conversations. Dominic talking about investment strategies, past business deals, even some veiled references to previous relationships. Nothing directly incriminating yet, but we were building a picture, assembling the puzzle pieces. Then one night, everything changed. We were having wine on the couch when Dominic's phone rang. He looked at the screen, and his face went pale. He needs to take this, he said, stepping onto the balcony. Through the closed door, I could hear his voice rising. He was arguing with someone, though I couldn't make out the words. When he came back inside, he looked genuinely rattled. The first crack in his armor I'd seen. Everything okay? I asked. Fine. Just work stuff. But it wasn't fine. For the first time since I'd known him, Dominic looked genuinely worried. Over the next few days, he became increasingly distracted. He'd check his phone constantly, make mysterious calls from his car, stay late at the office. Something had spooked him badly. I reported all of this to Elena. Someone's pressuring him, she said over the burner phone. Maybe Rachel's family is pushing harder for answers. Or maybe one of his other victims is causing problems. Should I ask him about it? No. Let him sweat. Worried people make mistakes. She was right. The following week, Dominic came home early with flowers and champagne. I want to accelerate our timeline. Let's get married next month instead of waiting 3 more months. My stomach dropped. Why the rush? Because I love you and I don't want to wait anymore. We can do something small, just us. We can always have the big celebration later. But I had my heart set on the big wedding. All our friends and family there. He took my hands, his grip just a bit too tight. I know, and we'll still do that. But legally, we can be married now. Start our official life together. Doesn't that sound romantic? It sounded like panic. Something had changed. Something had made him need to speed up his timeline dramatically. I called an emergency meeting with Elena, Sophie, and Natalie the next day. He's accelerating. Something made him panic. Elena pulled up something on her laptop. I think I know what. Rachel's family just hired a new private investigator, a good one with
extensive law enforcement connections. He's been asking questions about Dominic, using the name he was using when he was with Rachel. So Dominic knows someone is closing in, Sophie said, which means he's going to try to close this deal with you as fast as possible, get access to your trust, liquidate whatever he can, and disappear. Or worse, I said quietly. They all looked at me. What if he's planning to do to me what he did to Rachel? Take out a life insurance policy, stage my disappearance, collect the money from both the insurance and the trust? That's a possibility we have to consider, Elena said grimly. Then we need to move now, Sophie said. We can't wait for him to make his move. Natalie nodded. It's time to push him into confessing. Make him feel so confident, so secure, that he lets his guard completely down. We spent the next 3 hours crafting the perfect trap. It was risky, maybe insane, but we were out of other options. That evening, I came home with my own surprise. I've been thinking about what you said about getting married sooner, and you're right. Why wait? His relief was visible, almost palpable. Really? Really. In fact, I met with my trust administrator today. If we get married within the next 3 weeks, there's a tax advantage. Something about fiscal year processing. I was making this up, hoping he wouldn't question it too carefully. He didn't. That's perfect, he said, his eyes gleaming. Let's aim for 3 weeks from Saturday. I pretended to calculate. That's Valentine's Day weekend. How romantic. He kissed me and I tasted nothing but lies. Over the next 2 weeks, we threw ourselves into wedding planning. We applied for a marriage license, booked a small venue, invited a handful of close friends and family. To everyone else, we looked like a happy couple rushing to start their lives together. But every night, I was documenting everything, recording our conversations, backing up files, building an airtight case. Elena and Sophie were working with Rachel's family's new private investigator, sharing everything we'd gathered. Natalie was compiling her 15 years of research into a formal statement. The Thursday before the wedding, Dominic suggested we review our financial planning one more time. Just want to make sure we have everything in order, he said. We sat at the kitchen table with our laptops. He walked me through documents he'd prepared, joint accounts, beneficiary designations, power of attorney forms, and yes, a life insurance policy on me for $500,000. This is standard for married couples. We should both have policies on each other. How much is your policy?
The same, $500,000. We're equally protected. I pretended to review the documents carefully, asking intelligent questions, acting like the trusting partner he needed me to be. But I was also carefully positioning my laptop so its camera could capture both of us and all the paperwork. This all looks good, I said finally. But can you explain to me one more time how this helps us? I want to make sure I understand our financial strategy. And that's when he made his first real mistake. Well, he said, leaning back in his chair with practiced confidence, it's all about maximizing our assets while minimizing risk. For example, if something were to happen to one of us, the surviving spouse would be financially protected. The life insurance payout would be immediate. And with your trust fund combined with our joint accounts, we'd have complete financial freedom. If something were to happen, he said it with such practiced casualness, like he'd said it many times before. Has anything like that happened to people you know? I asked innocently. He shrugged. I had a girlfriend once who died unexpectedly. It was tragic. Really made me realize how important it is to be prepared. My blood ran cold, but I kept my expression neutral. Really? What happened to her? Car accident. Very sudden. If we'd had proper insurance and financial planning in place, it would have made a difficult time less stressful. I'm so sorry. That must have been hard for you. It was, but I learned from it. Now I always make sure my partners and I are financially protected. Partners. Plural. The recording device was capturing everything. Over the next few days, I carefully asked more questions, got him talking about previous relationships, about financial strategies, about the importance of proper estate planning. He was getting comfortable, confident. He thought he'd won, thought I was the perfect trusting Mark who'd sign anything he put in front of me. The day before the wedding, I met with Elena, Sophie, and Natalie one final time. Tomorrow, either we end this or I become his next victim. I said. You're not going to become his next victim, Elena said firmly. We have police standing by. The moment you give the signal, they move in. What's the signal? Sophie asked. I'm going to ask him directly about Rachel. During the ceremony, when he's surrounded by witnesses, when he thinks he's untouchable because it's his wedding day, I'm going to ask him what he did to her. That's incredibly dangerous, Natalie warned. If he realizes you know, that's why I'll have a microphone on. That's why police will be stationed nearby.
That's why all of you will be there as witnesses. What if he runs? Sophie asked. He won't, I said with more confidence than I felt. He's too arrogant. He thinks he's smarter than everyone. He'll think he can talk his way out of it. I hope you're right, Elena said quietly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Dominic, watching him breathe, wondering how many times he'd done this, how many women he'd lied to, how many lives he'd destroyed. Tomorrow, it would all end, one way or another. The wedding was set for 2 o'clock in a small garden venue. We'd invited about 30 people, mostly my friends and family. Dominic had claimed most of his family couldn't make it on such short notice, which I now understood meant they didn't exist, or he couldn't risk them revealing his real identity. I got ready in the bridal suite with my actual best friend, Olivia, who I'd finally told a version of the truth. Not everything, just enough that she understood something was wrong and I needed her support. Are you sure about this? She asked as she helped me into my dress. I'm sure, I said, though my hands were shaking. Elena and Sophie were also there, disguised as distant cousins from out of town. They'd both helped me wire up with a small microphone hidden in my bouquet. The police detective working with us, a woman named Detective Chen, had positioned officers around the venue dressed as catering staff and guests. Everything was in place. The ceremony began right on schedule. Dominic stood at the altar looking handsome and excited, completely unaware of what was coming. We got through the traditional opening, the readings, the exchange of vows. Then, right before the ring exchange, I stopped the officiant. Wait, I said. There's something I need to ask first. Dominic looked confused. What? I turned to face him directly, still holding his hands. I need you to tell me about Rachel. I need you to tell everyone here what happened to her. The color drained from his face. You're confused. I don't know anyone named Rachel. Really? Because I have photos of you two together. I have bank records showing you opened a joint account with her. I have documentation of a life insurance policy with you as the beneficiary. The guests were murmuring, confused and alarmed. Dominic's mother was in the front row, tears streaming down her face. This isn't the time or place, he said, his charm cracking. No, I think this is exactly the time and place. You were going to marry me, take out life insurance on me, get access to my trust fund, and then what? Make me disappear like you made Rachel disappear? I don't know what you're talking about, he said, but there was panic in his eyes now. Tell them about Victoria. Tell them about Natalie. Tell them about Elena and Sophie. Tell them about all the women you've done this to. Detective Chen was moving closer now, other officers positioning themselves to block the exits. Dominic looked around, realizing for the first time that he was trapped. His face transformed from panic to rage. You stupid bitch. You have no idea what you've done. So it's true then, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Everything Elena said, everything Natalie warned us about, you're a predator who's been doing this for years. He lunged forward, but 2 officers grabbed him before he could reach me. Dominic Hayes Sullivan, Detective Chen said, pulling out handcuffs. You're under arrest. As they read his rights, he was screaming that I'd ruined everything, that I was supposed to be different, that he'd planned this perfectly. He was still screaming when they loaded him into the police car. The aftermath was chaos. Guests trying to understand what had just happened, my parents rushing to my side, Olivia holding me as I finally allowed myself to break down. But there was also Elena and Sophie wrapping their arms around me in solidarity, Natalie standing nearby, tears streaming down her face, finally vindicated after 15 years. The investigation that followed was extensive. Using the recordings I'd made and the evidence Natalie had compiled, police were able to connect Dominic to multiple cases of fraud across 8 states. They found proof of at least 12 different victims, possibly more. Most importantly, they found Rachel. Her body was buried in a remote area near where her car had been abandoned. The autopsy showed she'd been strangled. A search of Dominic's computer revealed he'd researched ways to make a murder look like a suicide or an accident. He'd been planning to do the same to me. Dominic was charged with first-degree murder, multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and a dozen other crimes. His trial made national news. One by one, his victims took the stand. Natalie finally got to tell her story publicly. Victoria, watching from the psychiatric facility where she was receiving treatment, finally got validation. Dominic was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. As for me, I spent months in therapy, processing the trauma of loving someone who'd never existed, someone who'd been planning my murder while I planned our future. I eventually finished my degree, the one I'd put on hold because Dominic kept finding reasons why now wasn't the right time. I moved to a new city, started a new job, built a new life. A life where I trust carefully, but don't let fear prevent me from connecting with people. Elena, Sophie, and I became actual friends. We meet monthly, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to speak at events about financial abuse and predatory relationships. Natalie joined our group eventually, finally able to move past the fear that had defined her adult life.
We also started a foundation in Rachel's name. We help victims of financial fraud navigate the legal system, provide resources for rebuilding their lives, and work to strengthen laws around financial abuse and domestic violence. Sometimes I think about that moment in Dominic's mother's kitchen when she told me he was still married, how my entire world shifted in an instant, how everything I'd believed about my life turned out to be fiction. But I also think about how I chose to fight instead of run, how a group of women, most of whom were strangers, came together to stop a predator, how we turned our pain into purpose. My trust fund, the one Dominic wanted so badly, ended up funding the foundation. My grandfather would have been proud. It's been 3 years now. 3 years since I stood at that altar and asked the question that changed everything. 3 years since I became the woman who said no more. People sometimes ask if I regret falling for Dominic in the first place, if I wish I'd seen the signs earlier. The truth is, I don't spend much time on regret. What happened, happened. What matters is what I did about it. And what I did was make sure he could never hurt anyone else again. That's not regret. That's survival. That's justice. That's making sure Rachel's death and all the pain he caused actually meant something. I still wear a ring sometimes. Not an engagement ring, but a simple band I bought myself. A reminder that I'm enough on my own, that I don't need someone else to complete me. And when I catch my reflection wearing it, I see someone stronger than the woman who walked into that kitchen 3 years ago. Someone who knows that the most important love story is the one you write with yourself.